Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 616. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. Today, the SPaMCAST 616 features our interview with Tom Henricksen. Tom brings the industry two great events, the DevOps and the Agile Online Summits. He is also an active thought leader in the Agile community. During his recent visit to the podcast, we talked about the exciting changes to this year's Agile Online Summit. We also chatted about how creating and scaling the summit has changed how he thinks about the world. Tom is passionate about fostering learning and sharpening the saw. Tom suggests that tuning your skills and capabilities has never been more important as the economy struggles to get going again. Are you ready to talk Agile Online Summit 2020? It's time for the interview. Tom Henricksen, welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Thanks for having me, Tom. Always a pleasure to be on. Always enjoy the conversation with you.
It is one of my great pleasures. Tom, you are doing the Agile Online Summit again this year. Why don't you, well, before we dive in, I have some questions about what's different and all that kind of thing. But why don't you let the audience know when it is and how they can go out and find a ticket?
Excellent. Yes, Tom. So we have the Agile Online Summit coming up October 26th through the 30th this year. So we're trying to get out and let people know the best place to go to get tickets, and you can grab them now. We have tickets available at bit.ly/AOS-20-EB. Those are our early bird tickets. Now, I just want to let everyone know we do have free general admission. So if you just want to come and join us that week, you can get a free ticket, or you can upgrade to one of the VIP tickets, and we also have a coaching package. So that's kind of the basics of when it is and how to get involved.
Super. So, Tom, you've done this for a number of years. What's different this year?
Yeah, you're right, Tom. This is our fourth year, so we've tried to expand things. So usually before we've done it where I've done all the interviewing, but this year I've been working a little bit with Vasco Duarte from the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. And he said, Tom, it would be easier for you if you got some track chairs, kind of like some of the larger gatherings that we have. And I thought, well, that's a good idea. And we did reach out to some people. So we do have track chairs this year. And it's kind of great to see some of the people that have come forward and kind of share, put their spin on things. So we have people like, we have an engaging agile leadership track with Bob Galen. Some of you might know him from, he has his own Metacast that he does. We have Doc Norton. He's kind of a technical guy. He likes to focus on that. His track is Agile Technical Practices. So we have Doc. And then we do have the Women in Agile actually have two tracks. So they're going to have a track of experienced speakers that are going to speak in the Women in Agile space, but they also have a launching new voices. So what they do there is they take women who haven't spoke at a conference before, and they pair them with a speaking mentor. So they kind of help them develop their speech and what they're going to say and kind of coach them along. And this is a great program. So we're going to actually have two tracks with them. And then we have Neil Killick is going to do a customer-centric practice. So we have these tracks that, are kind of help give a unique spin. It's not just, my take, it's other people's take. And I love it, Tom. It's great to see all the people that have lots of great submissions.
So different tracks, is there more content this year? And why this year versus doing this before?
Well, we kind of kicked this idea around of having tracks, and I'll put that on me that I didn't get ahead of things because, we're talking now and trying to get things ready. To get the tracks ready, you kind of have to have a lot of things ready to go. So we had a call for speakers available earlier this year. We've closed that up. We had a great amount. I mean, we had almost 300 submissions. So we had a lot of submissions, which I was blown away. It was great. And so I like to think I get the easy part. I don't have to go through and select all these great submissions. I let other people do that, and they have the tough job. So they get to, go through those and kind of whittle them down to 4 or 5. So I think the track just kind of expands, like you mentioned. It gives us a little more content. It helps us kind of break up the day. So people, because as we look at these tracks, the way we can do it is then, people can be able to say, oh, okay, I'm really interested in, so for instance, like Jeff Watts has a online servant leader track. So if you're interested in leadership, you can look at that and kind of key in on those. Where before we kind of had, it was kind of all over the map. It was kind of like a Rorschach test, really, Tom. But we had lots of different speakers, but this will kind of help people understand, okay, who's going to be speaking? So like I mentioned, Doc Norton, he has an Agile technical practice. So if, for instance, people want to, that's where they want to learn more about, they can go to Doc's track and see what he's got. So it's great to, give people kind of a way to, like a big conference where they have the different tracks and they can kind of see what do they want to listen to.
You've done this in times when you had to compete against in-person conferences, that kind of thing. This year, by the time you run this, there probably still won't be many, if any, in-person conferences popping up. How do you think the sort of the environment has changed, and how will that affect the content and how many people show up?
That's a good question, Tom. And it's something I've kind of, tried to weigh as we've gone through this year and see how things have changed. The landscape of conferences have changed. And really, as you probably see this too, most things are, if they're going to go, they're going to go online. It's in a way, it makes me wonder, will there be more people wanting this or maybe less because there's so many Agile or, online conferences? I guess it seems like people have experimented with lots of different things. I guess the one thing that I'm happy with is that we've been doing it for a while. We understand we've been partnering with people like you on SPaMCAST and other, we have media promoters, we have community promoters that share it out with us. We try to help, engage the community. I mean, I live kind of near Princeton, New Jersey, and I get involved with their Lean Agile meetup there. And these communities, I think, are a great kind of place where a lot of this Agile community starts. But this is a way to kind of bring it online and broaden it. And I think I'm just kind of looking forward to, like I mentioned, with the track chairs, it seems like we're able to even engage in more a broader conversation because, we have people from all over being part of the track chairs, but then also to the submissions, like I said, are broader and wider and more robust. So I think it's really kind of helping us take the conference, the summit, to a next level.
I think you're right that there is a lot of stuff out there. I won't call it content. I won't call it knowledge. I won't call it information. Let's just call it stuff, because some of it is, some of it I think would be amusing late at night after several drinks because it's that level of quality. What have you learned from how other people have approached coming to market during this pandemic? I mean, obviously, you had the history. You have people that follow you and look forward to this every year. But how have you said, okay, we're dealing with this pandemic? Have you looked at how other people have approached this and changed?
Yeah, I think I always try to look at different ways we can do things. Like last year, we had a sponsor that helped us do some things with lean coffees. And we're looking at adding some additional things to have kind of that conference feel where you can have some of those conversations. One thing we've had for a couple of years is the Slack channel. We've had a Slack community, and during the conference, that gets going really well. There's a lot of great conversations that happen in there, but we're looking and trying to expand other ways to make things like those hallway conversations come alive in an online setting, because that's one thing I've seen some other conferences try to do, some more successful than others, and I just applaud them for trying. This is the Agile community. We all love our experiments, so some of them do well, and others just kind of like, oh, okay, I guess that didn't work. Back to the drawing board.
Come on, if you have an experiment that doesn't work, you're supposed to get rid of those people, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, I think we all have had our time to shine and our mistakes. So I guess that's one of those things where we keep trying. I know Vasco, and actually one of our other track chairs, Jeremy Kriegel, who he's doing a track on building inclusive products. And so he and Vasco are kind of partnering, and they have some ideas cooked up that I think are going to be really good. Some experiments. I think some of them will be hits. Some of them, might not be as successful, but we'll see. It's always hard to tell.
With all of these different voices, as someone who sort of represents the summit, how do you keep a consistent level of quality might be the right word, but let's use quality.
I think, to be honest, Tom, one of my things is I try to kind of let the track chairs decide a lot of that. I try not to be heavy-handed about what and how we do things. And I feel that, that's one of the things that where, I think some of the tracks may appeal to some people, some may not. But it gives the track chair kind of their unique style. Just like you on SPaMCAST, you have your own style. There's the Tom Kegley style that people, tune in and like to listen to. And I think that's one of the things, we are a big community. And I think it's, we can have a lot of different voices and a lot of different styles because, we're two guys talking. I'm sure there's people that probably don't want to listen to us talk. So it's one of those things we have to be willing to, have a lot of different voices in our community.
I think the multiple voices, the great diversity is the power of the community. But what I was thinking is, do you have a vision or, something that you really lay out to act as sort of a guiding star for where your track chairs go, where you're going with the summit?
I think it's really just to kind of expand it and to bring it to more people because it's one of those things, like I mentioned, I go to these meetups and, sometimes I think, you and me, Tom, we've been in the space for a while. We kind of think we understand things. And then you go and you meet people that maybe are, not as far and they're new to this space. And you think, okay, there's a place for, different conversations, maybe some that some of us might think, oh, I'm past that. That's, I dealt with that many years ago. But those conversations are still important to be kind of, as you, talk with different people and meet them where they're at, as you read, like I think we were talking a little bit before about Lisa Adkins, the different coaching models, of kind of meeting people where they're at. I think that's important to think about, we're not all at one place. We're not all advanced, agile-minded people. Some of us are in the Scrum world, some are in Kanban, some are using other scaling frameworks, and that it's important to, remember what brings us together and still have conversations and be open-minded to hear from all those different voices.
Yeah, I think regardless of where you might think you are, there are always new ideas that, well, as we were talking earlier, can be life-changing. And just because you've read and maybe been doing Agile for since the manifesto kind of time frame doesn't mean that tomorrow morning you can't pick up or have a conversation or listen to somebody and say, oh my, this is something I need to do. This is something that may change me forever kind of thing.
I think what you're talking about there, and I think is important to me, is sometimes, you think if you've been doing something for a little while, you think you have it mastered, but sometimes those beginners that come in and they ask a question that maybe has a little different tangent that you haven't thought of can make you think, especially if you might be, I've been guilty of this where I thought, oh, I have this part down. And then somebody brought up something to me that I was like, oh, wow, I had never thought about it that way. So you kind of get humbled by the fact of a different perspective.
Oh, that's a whole idea of a beginner's mind to look at things that way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. We often talk about things like shuhari, where you start at the beginning and end, and you get to a level where you have mastery. But what I think people forget is that is a continuum, because as soon as you get to mastery and rearrange the deck chairs, you're back at beginner again and relearning and re-struggling with all of those steps in that process. And yes, I know we may not like the word process, but that's a flow. That's a flow. If you reflect back on the summit for 2019, what's the one takeaway that changed your life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I guess I look at the different speakers and how they kind of impact our community. I think one of the people that we had last year, David Marquis, came to us and talked about his book, Leadership as Language. And it kind of made me think about, first off, how he is really, he's not really in essence an agilist, but he comes from us as, if you don't, I think probably some of your listeners know the story, but he was in the Navy. He famously wrote the book, Turn the Ship Around. But how he kind of came to that intent-based leadership and realizing that you're not going to know everything. That to me is a huge shift that I see a lot of leaders, especially even outside of the Agile community, we kind of talk about, what leadership is, but just kind of how important our words are. And then two, how, some of us approach the style of leadership differently, especially there's a lot of conversations as we have kind of two tracks in the Agile Online Summit about leadership, about what is the leader style and how that works. So I think some of us have some conceptions that are very interesting and that David brought up. And I think that was kind of, changing my perspective on leadership, really.
What are you looking forward most to this year? Have you decided yet?
Yeah, that's another good question, Tom. It's hard to say. I really, as we're preparing and I see the submissions, I see a lot of talks that I'm like, wow, I'm excited for this one. And then it seems like almost every talk I see that's been selected is like, wow. Or even two, I have to say this, we had so many good submissions. There's some talks that were turned down, but I'm like, wow, that's, these are some really good talks. So it makes me kind of empathize with some of the people submitting, but then two, the track chairs, the hard work they had to do to weigh, okay, we have some really big names here. We can't use them all. And it kind of brings us back to what we were talking about before. It's good to have some of these newer faces and newer voices in
Absolutely.
the Agile community. So
you mentioned the Women in Agile pieces and the new voices. Why did you decide to include the new voices? I actually think that's a marvelous program that goes on in the Women in Agile. Wish it went on back in the day when I was coming up and just in a broader sense.
Yeah.
But why did you decide to include those voices?
Yeah. Well, I started to reach out to Natalie Warner, who's kind of one of the founders of Women in Agile. We had a little discussion and we were talking about kind of how we could collaborate on this. And, she brought kind of up, we had a conversation. We had a conversation with Faye Thompson and Emily Breton, who are kind of the two chairs that we have, our track chairs, along with Natalie and a few other people with the Women in Agile. And when they brought that up, I thought this is a great way for us to, give some new people a place to kind of come to this and try it out. Because I think, as you mentioned, Tom, it could be tough to put a submission into a conference. Sometimes you're like, you put something in there, you're like, oh, this is going to be great. They're going to select this, no doubt. And then crickets, you don't hear anything or they turn you down and it can be tough. So I think the idea that they have of taking, people who are new and then mentoring them, I think, and that's probably what you're talking about, Tom. I would love to have somebody, I'll be honest, I've paid money to have, programs where they help me, do a better job in speaking and work on the content that I'm using in my speeches. So I think for them to do that, I'm like, this is awesome.
Why don't you walk through the logistics of how people can find out find out about the summit,
Yep.
how they can sign up. What are some of the VIP packages? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the best way is to go to the bit.ly link, bit.ly/AOS-20-EB, and that's for our early bird tickets. So you get those out there. So as you look in there and you go there, you'll see so essentially what we do is we have a free ticket, a general admission. That gives you content for the week. But if you want to access it later, and then there's also additional things for the VIP. So if you go out there now and you buy a VIP ticket, one of the best things about being a VIP is you can get access to the previous year's content. So if you go out there now, we have the 2019 content there. You can start watching some videos, looking at some of those things. And we have that there. And so those are some of the benefits of being a VIP. There's going to be a few other things. Like I mentioned, we're going to do some things during the summit. We will have some live Q&As. We're going to have some interactive events. Those all haven't been released, but we're going to be releasing those soon. We're kind of finalizing like I said, we have the submissions. We have the tracks pretty much nailed down. We have some keynotes, and then we're going to look to add some more to kind of make that real conference feel. And then, like I mentioned too, we also have a coaching program. So we have a 6-week coaching program where these track chairs are going to bring some of these people in, and they're going to have them interact with you. You'll get a sit down, have a talk with them, get your questions answered, and get that kind of support to help you, wherever you are. Because we mentioned before, even if you're a beginner, or maybe you've been, a scrum master or a coach, or been working in this space for a while, it always is helpful to get a new perspective. Kind of like you mentioned before, Tom, when we read books, I find that it's important when we read a book that when we come back to it, maybe 5 years later, how different we see that. And that's where I think something like coaching is important too, to get a different perspective, and maybe something you've tried before and you thought, oh, that will never work. And then you tried a little bit different. That's coaches and other professionals can really help you with a unique perspective.
Before we break, you've been at this for 4 years. How are you a different human being than you were before you started?
I think it's really helped me appreciate the kind of journey we're all on, and how we, these things can change. I will be honest, the place I work now is kind of going through an agile transformation, and I see a lot of struggling. And I think it's really makes me realize why it's important to have people like, have a coach or have somebody to come in and help guide us through the kind of the tumultuous journey we go on, and how we can, and even really simply how change can be hard. Personally, it can be hard. And especially when you get to an organization where you're asking everybody to, okay, we want to do this a little differently. That can be really hard. And we really need to apply some grace to people. I'll be honest, I'm probably a very impatient person, and I get frustrated quickly. So I always, sometimes have to come and reflect and kind of think about, okay, am I being graceful to the people I'm with? And sometimes I have to give a little grace to myself too, because, like we talked about before, I try some experiments and they don't always work.
Doesn't the word experiment presuppose that it presupposes that they all will work. They just will not have a positive outcome, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Because you probably learned from all of those experiments. So they were valuable. They just didn't end up with, proving the hypothesis. They may have disproved the hypothesis, so to speak. Tom, this has been absolutely marvelous. Where can people, find out about the conference one more time, and where can they continue the conversation with you?
Yeah. If they want more information about the conference, I think to go to bit.ly/AOS-20-EB and look for tickets. Or if you want to just go to agileonlinesummit.com, you'll see the whole lineup there of who we have already, the keynotes, the track chairs. And like I said, we'll have that schedule coming out shortly. If anybody has any questions, feel free to email me, tom@agileonlinesummit.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm also on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. But quick email, I'd be happy to answer any questions, because it seems like, especially as the summit gets closer, people have questions, and I'd be happy to help them with that.
Super. We'll have all that contact information in the show notes and on the website. Tom, again, this has been absolutely marvelous, and I'm really happy that this is continuing forward. It's been a marvelous journey that you've been on.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea where you want this to go in the future before we actually go away?
Well, I think it's just great to see it grow and see the conference engage more people and get out there, especially we're kind of in some interesting waters here, really, as we see. And I think, it just makes it important that we do some things online but still have those connections. Because I think about, you and me, Tom, we've never met in person, but I feel like we have a pretty good relationship, and I think that's important.
Yeah, that's actually pretty funny. If you look back, we never have. But I would know your face because we've done a lot of videos.
Oh, yeah.
And we've talked many times.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Tom, absolutely fantastic. Until next time, when you visit the Software Process and Measurement Cast. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
This week in Reread Saturday News, I find Chapter 14 useful in a book of useful chapters. In this chapter, Steve and Daniel explain the earlier foreshadowed idea of full kitting and introduce 2 different versions of Kanban boards. Have you bought your copy of Tendon and Daniel Doiron's Tame Your Workflow? Link in the show notes to support the author, the blog, and the podcast. The Software Process and Measurement Cast is a proud sponsor of the following events. The Rust Conference. Let's Talk Rust on September 15th. Link in the show notes. We are a proud sponsor of the Live at Manning Women in Tech Conference on October 3rd. Link again in the show notes. We're also a proud sponsor of the Agile Online Summit that we talked about in this week's podcast. The Agile Online Summit was created for people who couldn't attend a major conference and is developing into a major conference. The conference runs from October 26th to the 30th, 2020. Link in the show notes. Sign up. There's a free version, and then there's VIP versions. In the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 617, we'll feature our essay on rediscovering productivity. The essay begins, I have not worked outside of my house office since mid-April. There are lots of benefits to this change. My commute is really short. I run a lot more. I get to hang out with my wife more. And I've lost 42 pounds. But not everything is unicorns and rainbow. Time feels a bit wonky. Let's unwonkify time. We'll also hear from Susan Prente, who brings her Not a Scrum-Fundamentalist column to the Software Process and Measurement Cast. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?